sun shining, everything's going well on suicide construction, suicide prevention week, and as Vermont is honoring it with a stand down today. Before we get there, though, I'd like to just take a minute, just 1 minute, and remember that today is 9/11, and if we could just, it's the 23rd anniversary, and if we could just take a moment and think about those that we have lost in that incident. Thank you all for joining us again. Again, it's Suicide Prevention Week. The whole world actually raises awareness about suicide prevention during this time, September 9th through the 13th. And beginning just this year, they broke out a whole new section just on construction suicide awareness, and have been promoting it, have been pushing it out there. And the reason they've done this, and I don't mean to jump into your place, but the reason they've done it is the rate of death by suicide for construction workers is 5.5 times greater than construction fatalities out on job sites. And the rate of suicide in construction is more than 4 times higher than the general population. So we do have a problem. We are trying to address it. I think we're making great strides in it. And in doing so, we've invited or we're honored with Reed Wabi, who has become over the last 2 years quite a professional in this mental health world. And thank you for all you've given, and thank you for all you've done. I guess I'll just step to the side.
Perfect.
And let you take off.
Great. Is this working for us?
It should be, or we'll find out when we try it.
Great. Awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. Again, it's Suicide Prevention Week, and specifically Construction Suicide Prevention Week. So really happy to have you all here. I hope that you were able to earlier in the week on Monday view our toolbox talk, which was kind of fun, but also talked about some of the really serious issues that we're going to hit on here again. One of the big things that I want to touch on today is just destigmatizing the conversation around suicide prevention, and mental health. Suzanne, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier before we were starting the conversation or started the meeting, that the more we have these conversations, and if you could just get the PowerPoint fired up for me, I'd appreciate it. The more we have these conversations, and in the more kind of diverse circles that we're having these conversations, the easier it's going to be for all of us to continue to have them, or when one of us is struggling, the easier it will be for us to kind of bring up that struggle to someone who can help point us in the right direction. So again, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. We're going to be talking kind of in a very specific portion of our Diseases of Despair campaign, and our Diseases of Despair campaign more specifically in the suicide prevention arena. Again, Suicide Prevention Week, and it is Suicide Awareness Month. So a topic of really important conversation anytime, but especially during this week and month. As my dad talked about earlier, this is a topic that we don't frequently like to discuss, and oftentimes when it is brought up, we kind of question to ourselves, oh, we're talking about this again. Is it really that big a deal? It is that big a deal. If we look at suicide by national numbers, by state numbers, or by industry numbers, we can see that suicide is affecting us at a disproportionate rate. By us, it depends on how you draw the circle, but nationally, we can see that males are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than females. And white males, 25 to 44, are the most likely of any age, sex, demographic to die by suicide. In Vermont, the suicide rate is up. It continues to go up, and it's higher than Florida, California, Texas, or New York. And in our industry, we can see, or again, in our state, we can see 2.4 Vermonters die by suicide each week. And Vermonters die by suicide at a rate 30 times higher than the national average. All of these things are clear indicators that there is a problem that's affecting us, and that we should be doing more to stop it. Again, if these numbers were kind of referring to people dying in plane crashes or people dying from eating at a specific type of food, we would be acting very appropriately to do something to curb those deaths. And we should be acting appropriately as we have been. We need to continue to act appropriately to try and curb these numbers. Again, these are the same numbers, just represented a little bit differently. We can see that if we look at the male category, obviously much higher than female. 4 times, as we talked about earlier, males are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than females. And then if we look at kind of the racial demographics, we'll see that people of white nationality are far more likely to die by suicide than of any other race or nationality. Finally, if we look at the kind of age demographics, 25 to 64 years old in that age bracket are again the most likely ages to die by suicide, all of which make up the Vermont construction industry. If we kind of pare down those demographics to give us the most quintessential Vermont construction worker, they would fit almost always in those demographics. Another thing that I was really surprised and scared to see, this is a graph or a table from the CDC, and really I want to point out those first 3 or 4 columns in the graph. We're talking about the age groups of 10 to 14, 15 to 24, and 25 to 34. Suicide is in the top 3 causes of death in all of those age groups. 10 to 14, suicide is the age group. Sorry, one second. Nice. Okay, you got it in there. Perfect. Sorry about that. You will see that suicide is the second leading cause of death for people in the age group of 10 to 14. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about here can be taken away, don't just need to be used on the job site or in your kind of authority as whatever job title you hold. They should be taken and used every day in every aspect of your life. Signs and symptoms of somebody dealing with crisis or suicide. As you can see here, it doesn't just affect working age people. The second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds is suicide. So use some of these things, signs and symptoms, recognition, to help stop these things from happening potentially in your personal lives. In Vermont, we'll see the same numbers. I'm not going to go through them specifically, but they're telling us the same story. Suicide is affecting us as Vermonters. We all now, I can say this with almost relative certainty, that we all in our personal lives, whether it's our immediate or our extended personal lives, have been affected and have lost to suicide, right? So these pictures and infographics aren't showing us anything that we don't already know, but it's important to see the numbers and see that this really is a topic of important conversation and something that we should be acting on. If we look at the rate by industry, we can see construction, which is about the 5th one down on this list, has a suicide rate. And again, these are the most recent numbers that are available in these formats, but construction and about 10 down is mining. Both have the highest rates of suicide by industry out of any other category. I think the next highest that we'll see in here is agriculture. But again, all of these are indicators that our industry, our demographics, our people, our communities are being affected by suicide. One of the biggest reasons, and again, I mentioned it to Suzanne just a bit ago, but one of the biggest reasons that we're having this conversation is to destigmatize and continue to promote the topic of mental health and taking good care of yourself. The more that we have this conversation, whether it relates to suicide prevention, substance use disorder, overdose prevention, or at large, the diseases of despair, the more we talk about these things, the more people will feel comfortable bringing up issues, bringing up concerns that they have, and having the conversation rather than dealing with it the alternative way, which in this instance is suicide, right? So the more that we talk about these things, the more people are going to be comfortable with going to somebody and saying, I'm dealing with an issue, I need help, right? We want people to feel comfortable enough that they can say, I need help. And we need to be able, when that difficult conversation arises, we need to be able to know where to point them. The more we have this conversation, the easier those secondary conversations will be. So again, when we're talking about destigmatizing the conversation around suicide, all of that revolves around the language that we're using. A lot of times people don't want to come up and talk to someone that they love or that they care about and tell them that they're dealing with a crisis, because putting that burden onto someone else can really foster a lot of feelings of self-blame in the person that really needs to be helped, right? And one of the ways we can help alleviate that burden from that person who's dealing with an internal struggle or crisis is through the language that we use around this conversation, around the conversation of suicide prevention. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it is just important to remember that the words that we use matter and can have an impact on the person that we're using the words with, right? Obviously, just as an example, if we're talking about suicide and we're talking about it and say a successful attempt at suicide, we're obviously putting kind of like a positive implication or a positive connotation through the use of the word successful on this really like negative incident, right? So again, rather than talking about a successful suicide attempt, we can say a suicide death or died by suicide. Someone, rather than dealing with suicidal crisis or someone who's thinking of killing themselves, we can talk about them in terms of someone who we're working with someone in crisis. This person is actively in crisis, right? And again, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Something that we need to not get hung up on, right? While we still need to remember that the words are important, we also need to not get hung up on, I don't want to have this conversation because I'm not sure I'm using the right words. The most important thing is the intention behind the words. And if that intention is, I care about you, I've noticed you're struggling, and I want to help you, choosing the right words is less important, right? If we're prioritizing, again, it's on the list of priorities, but it might not be the highest. The highest thing always when we're talking about these conversations dealing with substance use, substance misuse disorders, someone in crisis, or someone dealing with active thoughts of suicide, is we need to approach it with care. We need to treat those people with care and let them know that we're here for them. Some of the signs and symptoms of someone in crisis, right? Someone actively in crisis or someone who is having thoughts of suicide, there are a wide range of warning signs. But again, one of the things that we talk about, or that I like to focus on, is if we know the people around us as people, not just as the positions they hold, i.e. if you know me as Reed Wabi, the person, rather than Reed Wabi, the janitor, or Reed Wabi, the excavator operator, or Reed Wabi, the safety guy. If you know me as a person, it will be very easy for you to notice that something is different about me. I'm interfacing with the world in a much different capacity than I normally do. You won't be able to notice those things about the people around you, the people that you care about, if you're not actively participating in the friendship, actively participating in the relationship with them as a person. It's just kind of like a subordinate relationship or something like that, right? So first and foremost, we need to know the people around us as people. That will allow us to be able to identify changes in that person, which if we look on here is one of towards the bottom. This list is in no kind of like particular order, but if we look on the bottom, we'll see withdrawal or social change, and we'll also see personality change, right? Those are two of the biggest indicators that someone is dealing with something, whether it's progressed to crisis or suicidal crisis. We don't know, but those are indicators that someone is dealing with something. Again, signs and symptoms that you, depending on who you ask or which list you refer to, the signs and symptoms could be relatively short and similar to this, could be much longer and a diverse range of answers. What we need to do is care for the people around us, actively care for the people around us. And the key way that we can do that is by knowing them, communicating to them, and treating them like people rather than like the positions or the titles that they hold. Crisis response, again, we're talking about this in hopes that no one ever has to deal with a crisis, but that's not the case. We will likely have to deal with some sort of crisis in our lives, whether it's in our personal lives, our professional lives, or kind of our play lives. Whether you're a coach on a local team, a pastor at a local church, or you're the head safety guy, right? In one of those sectors of your life, one of those spheres of your life, you are likely to encounter someone who is dealing with crisis. One of the most important things that we can do when we recognize this is not to wait, right? Is to say something, mention something. Again, one of the reasons we're having this conversation is to destigmatize the conversation around it. We need to be comfortable enough in our relationships and in ourselves to be able to go up to people around us and say, I care about you. Are you okay? Is everything okay? Is something wrong? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? When we notice these things, we hear these conversations all the time. Me in dealing with kind of all of the partnership stuff that I do, I've dealt with a few post-benching cases. And one of the biggest things that in those kind of instances people say reoccurringly is like, I should have noticed the signs. I should have said something. I didn't say something. And the signs were all there in front of me. I just didn't ever expect my loved one to do this, right? If you see something, say something, don't wait. In terms of construction, we would not hesitate. If we saw somebody when we got onto a job site, we wouldn't hesitate to yell at them and say, hey, you're up there 20 feet on that roof without any fall protection. What are you doing? Put your fall protection on. We wouldn't hesitate to protect that person that we care about. The same thing. There are indicators when someone's not doing well, when someone's dealing with crisis. We should speak up and say something and remind them that there are resources out there. There's a safety net. We can help them get the help they need. They might not know unless we mention it to them. 1 second, I got a little pop-up here. There we go. Great. The other thing that I want to focus on, again, don't wait. The other thing is actions speak louder than words, but words still work. In this instance, we want to focus on our words, on our language. We talked about it earlier. The correct thing to do if we notice someone is dealing with crisis is not to say, sit right here, I'm going to go get help. The correct response is to be with that person, to talk with them, to help them get help, to bring them to the person at your office or in your lives that's going to help that person. Don't leave them alone, especially if they've kind of expressed the feelings of their dealing with suicide, right? We don't want those people alone. We want to continue to have the conversation with them and to try and get them help as quickly as we can. This damn pop-up. Bingo. And again, the last thing, actively care for people. When we think about our list of priorities, language is on there. The way we talk about suicide and the way we talk about crisis matters. But the most important thing is caring, actively caring for the people around us, whether that means you're wearing the hat of job site foreman or coach or father or friend. Actively care for the people around you. That means saying something if you notice that something is wrong, if you notice something is off, if you notice they're not acting like themselves. Be a good friend, be a good leader, be a good person, actively care for the people around you. Remember that stigma is real. There is a lot of self-blame that a person feels for telling someone their problems, telling someone they're dealing with crisis, right? Remember that and be there for that person. Remind them that you're here to help and that you care for them, that it's no problem. You're there for them, right? Because that self-blame and the stigma currently surrounding the conversation of suicide and the kind of negative feeling that the conversation can sometimes put in the air is a lot, especially for someone who's already actively dealing with crisis. Help them de-escalate that situation. Help them de-escalate those feelings of self-blame by actively caring for them, by being there for them, and by treating them as a person. Again, if you can't remember all this stuff, there's a easy little kind of 4 or 5 word thing that you can remember. See, ask, listen, get help. If you see a problem, ask the person if they're doing okay, and more specifically, ask the person if they're thinking of hurting or killing themselves. We'll talk about it here in a second, but there's a lot of ways that someone who's not doing well, who is dealing with crisis, can avoid answering the question directly of, how are you doing? When really you mean to ask, are you okay? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? We can skirt around the first question. It's more difficult with the second question, right? So see, ask the question, listen to the answer. That's very important. Maybe you're going to say, hey man, you just haven't been acting like yourself the last couple of days. I don't know what's going on. And they're going to say, yeah, I'm dealing with a lot. My wife decided to leave me and I'm just struggling with that. I haven't been sleeping well. That's one response. And maybe that warrants another kind of further conversation. And then there's response about, we just had a new kid and I haven't been sleeping well and I feel like a zombie, but I'm doing great. I've never been happier. That response also answers the question of, why haven't you been acting like yourself? Right? So we need to ask the question and we need to listen to the answer. And finally, once we've listened to the answer, we need to get help, and we need to know where to look for that help if the need arises. Again, all this is in the end goal of destigmatizing the conversation around mental health, around suicide, so people who are dealing with crisis feel more comfortable in asking for help and asking where they can get resources for help, or in just saying, I'm not doing well and I need someone right now. Again, we talked about asking the question, see, ask, listen, get help. There are a couple of different ways that we can ask this question. Again, the question at the bottom line, at its face, is, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Those are difficult questions to ask, especially just bluntly and directly like that. I was assist trained in the Army. Assist is the Army's suicide prevention program. And through that training, they teach you to ask the question in no uncertain terms. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Because that question in no uncertain terms has two answers, yes or no, right? That's a difficult question to ask, especially very directly like that. So there are a few different ways that we can ask it, as are indicated on the screen here. The less direct approach, again, is kind of the less blunt way of asking the question. And the direct approach is obviously the more direct way of asking the question. At the end of the day, the question needs to be kind of focused on receiving a yes or a no answer. And in my opinion, if we are having this conversation because we believe that someone is struggling, we should not be afraid to ask, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Or are you thinking of killing yourself? Taking the direct approach. It's a hard conversation to have, and the answer could be equally as hard to receive, but not asking it could lead to an alternative, right? And that alternative is we lose that person, or that person loses a member of their family. So again, it's always best, ask the question directly. Again, when we're having this conversation, when we're asking these questions, when we're listening to the answer, when we're explaining to the person, I care about you, I've been thinking about you, you haven't been acting like yourself lately, there are ways that we can say that have a very negative connotation, that have kind of a connotation that reinforces the self-blame that person's already feeling on themselves. And some of those ways that conversation looks like are like this. You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? Or suicide is dumb. Surely you're not thinking about suicide. Obviously, in those two instances, we're kind of calling the person stupid indirectly. Only a stupid person would do that thing that you're thinking about doing. So you must be stupid, right? The other thing we're doing is we're kind of putting them in a position where they're not ever going to be able to answer that question truthfully because of the respect that that person has for you, the question asker, right? If that is your as the person who's asking the question, if that's your opinion on someone who's dealing with crisis, that person that you're asking the question to doesn't want to make you reinforce that by looking at them, right? So we need to think about how we're posing these questions. Again, you'll see the one on the bottom there with nothing in it. The worst thing that we can do, one of the things that continues to propagate the stigma, is not saying anything, by sitting by silently, noticing that someone's acting different, observing that they're likely suffering or dealing with crisis, and not saying anything, not letting them know that there are resources out there available for them, right? So again, these are all ways that we're kind of reinforcing stigma when we want to be destigmatizing. Great. A few different ways that we can continue to destigmatize the conversation around suicide and suicide prevention. We can continue to have kind of meetings like this, toolbox talks, 5-minute huddles, midweek meets, whatever your company calls it. Every once in a while, throw in a topic about suicide prevention, about mental health, about dealing with crisis. This only helps to reinforce that in this particular community, whether that community is your team, your job site, your company, your community, whatever it is, that this conversation can be had here, that this is a space that your feelings matter and that we care about how you're doing outside of just your production for the team, right? So continue to have the conversation within your groups, develop a contact, whether it's with your employee assistance program or with some other mental health group that you work with as a company or as a community. Develop a contact there. That way, when you do get confronted with a situation of someone dealing with crisis, you know who to reach out to, right? So it's not let me figure this out with this person sitting right here. That adds an awful lot of stress to you in an already difficult and stressful situation, right? So have those contacts and have made kind of that initial conversation with these people in the kind of support and resource realm. So when someone is dealing with crisis, you know who to turn to. And again, that goes into having the resources available. I have a ton of resources to hand out, amazing resources for the confidential mental health line. I've got a bunch of cards for man therapy, which is an amazing thing we'll talk about in a second. I've got gun locks. If any of you didn't get or want another of kind of, we're calling this the like the mental health resource starter kit. We mailed these out earlier in the year. We've got a bunch of those. So there are resources out there and available. I'd love to get you some. If you don't have some, please let me know, but have those resources available. The three biggest things when we're talking about destigmatizing the conversation are these next three people, or are these next three things. Actively care for your people, know your people, and talk to your people, right? Talk to your people, not just as the position they hold in whatever community we're talking about. They're your left forward, or they're your excavator operator, or they're your controller, or whatever it is, right? These people are people. We should know them as people and talk to them as people, and we should not be afraid to say, hey, I care about you. Is everything okay? How can I help you? Those conversations are difficult to have. It's much easier to be very topical in day-to-day conversation and not kind of mention these more difficult things. But again, that just feeds into the stigma around the conversation rather than destigmatizes it. If you see something, say something. The only way you'll see something is if you know your people and actively care for them. The other two great things that we can do in preparation as kind of an industry or as a company is develop a mental health awareness program and develop a crisis response plan. The Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention has this awesome kind of like questionnaire that will help you identify holes in your or your company's mental health program and your crisis response, how you would respond to it, whether you have anything written down or not. It's a great tool to see where your holes are or to see where to start. If you don't have anything or this is kind of coming by blindside to you and you really want to get ahead of it, I can help you with both of these things, mental health awareness program and crisis response plan. And I have kind of some templates for both of these that we could work on together to make sure your company is ready in case something happens, right? So there's no shortage of resources that are here, and by having them available, having them sitting out in your office, making sure we're talking about them, continuing the conversation with the important people in your lives, it helps to destigmatize the conversation when someone who's not doing okay, who's actively dealing with crisis or dealing with suicidal crisis, needs someone to talk to, and they know this is a place that it's okay to have this difficult conversation, and they know where to turn. They know where resources are that can help, right? So all things that we can do to continue to destigmatize the conversation around suicide and suicide prevention. Some other resources that I mentioned, and I'm going to skip right through this. These are online resources that are available, and I'd be happy to share this PowerPoint out with this group after this in case you want to look more deeply into these resources. Again, I would absolutely recommend Man Therapy. It's kind of a therapy program that's intended for the male or masculine audience, and it's kind of directed by a Ron Swanson type guy. It takes humor and a bunch of different things into account. It's not your typical mental health resource, but it is a great mental health resource for men, right? Or masculine people. So again, that's a great resource. These are some of the numbers that our employee wellness partnership have been able to help throughout the year. So the last resource that I want to talk about is Invest EAP. And Invest EAP is a partner in our employee wellness partnership. There is a 1 year free of charge program that they're running for the construction industry. Invest EAP is an amazing mental health resource, not just for people dealing with crisis, but people who are dealing with financial stress, employment stress, relationship stress. They have a bunch of different resources. And they're a member of the Employee Wellness Partnership. I would absolutely recommend, if you don't have an employee assistance program, or if you're just looking to kind of bolster your already filling toolkit on mental health resources, I would absolutely recommend Invest EAP and Kathy Murphy Moriarty over there. They're an amazing resource. The other resource is Man Therapy that I can't recommend enough. It resonates very well with the at-risk and disproportionately affected crowd that we're talking about.
You have a question out there, Reed?
Beauty. Let's see what we got.
Hardeman's got a question. Ed?
Yeah, it's more of a comment. I had we just got EAP this year, and we had one of our guys is out right now. He checked himself into a mental hospital because he was suicidal. And he's still out. He'll be back next week, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty serious. I never would have known. I guess he called them, and he seemed like he was all right. I hadn't seen him in a month or so because he was on a different job site. But yeah, I just figured I'd throw that out there.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I think that resonates with me for two reasons. Ed, it's hard to know. We might never know, but what's great about it is you had that relationship with Invest EAP. There were a resource that was able to help this person before it became unhelpable, right? So I would just say, again, that's kind of singing the praises of Invest EAP. They're a great resource out there for us. And I would, again, recommend any of you who haven't kind of had a conversation with them to do so. Are there any other conversations out there?
You've said this a few times.
Yeah.
How to get a hold, or to contact you, or how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
And I put some information in the chat.
Great.
But it's reed.wabi@gmail.
reed.wabi@gmail, and my cell phone number is 802-793-7715. I'd love to help you just continue this conversation. If you need more resources, or if there's other things that you want to talk about in terms of the diseases of despair, overdose prevention, suicide prevention, happy to help you on a more individual basis as well. Other questions about this, about Suicide Prevention Week, or just suicide prevention in general?
So I take it, we had, stay, because I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah.
He always gets nervous when I start going down this road.
Yeah.
Only because we spent some time fixing a lawnmower the other day.
Yeah.
And we did a video there, and we have now spent some time with you discussing this.
Yep.
And I wasn't really in that boat. I was standing up in a canoe, not knowing where I was going.
Yep.
Or what was going to happen.
Yep.
But throughout your two areas that we've shared, you keep coming back to four main things.
Okay.
Every time.
Yeah.
And ask for help.
Well, the four things are see, ask, listen, and get help. See, ask, listen, get help. Those are the four things.
Those are my notes.
No.
Ask for help.
Yep. See that there's a problem. As a leader, that means we need to know our people as people. See the people around us, that there's a problem. And then if we see that, we got to ask.
Okay.
And we have through asking, we have to recognize that this person isn't likely just gonna come up and say, I got a problem. Because there's a lot of self-blame that's involved in that. Me putting my burden of bullshit on me.
Another one on my.
I know you were going to just grab self-blame.
What's on my list?
So we're gonna ask, and we need to remember that there's self-blame that comes along with asking that question. The next one is.
So we gotta receive that. So
Exactly.
not to exasperate that self-blame. We gotta receive
Exactly.
it, we gotta receive it well,
Exactly.
which again comes to that friendship thing, that
And then actively care, 100%.
AC4P,
Exactly. That's exactly what it comes down
actively
to.
caring for my tractor.
Exactly. Which is a great thing to care for. But so C, ask, we're gonna listen to their answer. Again, they could just be dealing with normal stress, or they could be dealing with something that maybe warrants a few other questions to see how they're doing, right? But we need to listen to their answer, and then we need to know where we're going to get help from.
Sure.
See, ask, listen, get help. Those are
I'm going through a hard time. I can't be embarrassed about it. I
exactly.
can't be.
We have to recognize that self-blame is not abnormal, right? But we also have to recognize that nobody is doing 100% of the time. We're not always just running green. Your tractor's not always just running perfectly. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes the fuel filter blows. Sometimes our girlfriend leaves us, or sometimes we don't have the money that we wish we had for a vacation, right? No one's ever doing 100%, 100% of the time. We have to know where to look for help when we're at our lows.
So you've said a couple words, so
Yeah.
we'll wrap this right up here.
Beautiful.
988.
Yes, an amazing resource. 988 is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. They do calls, text, and emails, video chat and stuff.
988.
National resource.
.com, whatever.
Great.
it is.
Yep,
Right.
both of those.
You man therapy.
Yep,
I checked that out. That was huge.
That's cool.
Not that I was going through
of
problems,
course.
but I had to check out what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
None of us are ever going through problems. It's a great website to just
100%.
plus around. Yeah.
Man therapy.
But it's cool. It's not your normal mental health resource, right? There's a little bit of humor, there's some car stuff, there's some videos, but it's a little bit different, but it's a good resource to check out. Mantherapy.com.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Kathy Moriarty.
Invest EAP, an amazing local, industry specific resource that I would absolutely recommend to anyone.
And she did tell me she doesn't know how to change a fuel filter.
I think she was just being modest.
Okay. And then there was another one, and I forget what it is right now.
The last one is if you need any of these mental health resource starter kits, reach out either to me or to AGC and we'll make sure to get you what you need.
And just agcvt.org.
Yep.
agcvt.org. You can download the videos, both from our
That's what we out there in a little bit. Yep.
Toolbox talk the other day, and this video will be out there shortly.
Yes.
Once again, award-winning programs. You are like hot.
We're going to DC here in a couple of weeks, which is amazing. Yeah.
Piece of brass. So
A little bit on the wall.
I do thank you
Yeah,
for
of course.
everything.
Absolutely.
And for all your help through this.
Yep.
If no one else has anything, Ed, you got your hand up again, I see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one other thing, and that is that something that's been very fruitful that I've done and seen is if you really just stop somebody when they're alone or together or whatever and tell them how much you appreciate the work they do, because the work we do in construction is honest and it's tangible, and pretty much all of what you do every day, even if it's 90%, that's still fantastic, is helping society, and it's great. Whereas, you look at the fancy people in the big skyscrapers in the big city, they're all doing paperwork all day long.
Yes.
Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I bet a bunch of it's pointless. And our society pretty well treats the demographic that we inhabit like shit. Like
That
we're
we're
not,
talking about 100%.
you know, like
Yeah.
we're you want to talk about
A little
stigmas,
thank
like
you and a little appreciation goes a long way, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying, absolutely. And like a little bit of recognition for hard work and for a job well done that honestly doesn't get said enough, right? I absolutely agree.
yeah, because a lot of guys, they don't get it anywhere else. They don't get it at home. They don't get it from the news. They don't get it on the TV. They don't get it on the internet. It's
Yeah.
just all negative all the time. So if you can be that one bright spot, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
So again, I'll wrap this up, and
Great.
I appreciate, of course, everything you've done and
Happy to do it.
all we're doing. And you can check out the, again, website, agcvt.org. You have a website, I understand.
I do. I have a website, bunch of resources available, as well as a way to get in touch with me available there. So, yep, absolutely.
Guys, thank you for joining us. It's been a great stand down, a lot of good information, and we appreciate all your time and energy today. Try to spread the word. One thing we asked for the other day was if you are doing a talk or you do have the opportunity to take a picture of a job site, we would love to see some pictures of job sites or offices.
Doing these kind of talks,
That we
just
share.
stigmatize it,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We got a video the other day.
We did from ECI.
Right off after asking, it was there.
Yep.
So thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll catch up with you again. Thank you.
Thank you.